Welcome to our Listen and Be Heard YouTube channel. We post the unedited videos of our featured guests on the Listen and Be Heard podcast and radio show, which is entirely non-commercial and also available here on our YouTube channel and at listenandbeheard.net. I'd like to welcome. That's the word. I'd like to welcome Nick Courtright, publisher of Atmosphere Press, to the Listen and Be Heard audio garden. How are you today, Nick?
I'm great. I'm glad to be here.
I'm really glad to have you and sort of talk about the whole landscape of publishing, hybrid publishing. And I thought I'd start with talking about some of the motivations for hybrid publishing. Brooke Warner from She Writes Press. I was reading about her journey towards why she started She Writes, which really came out of her working in the publishing, so-called traditional publishing industry, and seeing all these books that she thought should get published that were not getting published. And she became passionate about offering some other kind of way for those great books to get published. Now, you're a writer yourself, and so I wanted to hear from you sort of your journey from being a writer to also being a hybrid publisher, and a pretty well-known one, I think, at this point.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think it's interesting because, I'm familiar with Brooke and her work, and it is interesting because she came at it from the position of somebody in traditional publishing that saw the problems in traditional publishing from inside traditional publishing. I saw those same kinds of problems from the author's perspective. So I had gotten an MFA. I had a couple of my books published at that point, and I knew a lot of other authors who had gone through problematic experiences in publishing.
If I can stop you for one moment, what kind of books were they, and what were the titles?
So those books are poetry collections. One of them is called Punchline. That one came out in 2012. And then Let There Be Light came out in 2014. And they're both sort of like cosmic about the meaning of life, about the universe, the cosmos, how to make sense of existence. And I've sort of continued writing about, similar themes going forward. But those were kind of, some formative experiences for me. And I knew a lot of authors who had, difficult experiences trying to, publish their books. And even if they were lucky enough to get a publishing contract, they often were cut out of the process. They didn't have say over editorial decisions, or didn't have a say over when their book was going to be released or what the cover was going to look like. So when I started Atmosphere, I knew from the very beginning that I wanted it to be an author-friendly publisher in which the author had a lot of say over the process, that they were really involved, because I knew as a writer just how much heart and time and effort, goes into actually creating a manuscript.
And when you call yourself a hybrid publisher, let's kind of just give a definition to people what that really means. And even though it does, I think, cover sort of a gamut of things from your perspective as Atmosphere Press. What does that mean that you're a hybrid publisher?
Yeah, so I always want to refer people to the IBPA's standards and criteria for what constitutes a hybrid publisher. They have, worked hard. They're, looking out for authors, looking out for people who are, in the writing and publishing industry. And they've sort of put together a list of guidelines. Some of them are that the press is selective. Some of them are that the press is going to provide clear services. All of them across the board do require an author investment. So it's not a situation like with a traditional publisher where they're going to take the rights from your book and, give you a very small amount of royalties on the back end. And that's where they're going to make their money, off of royalties. With hybrid publishing, the author is contributing upfront, and in exchange for that, they keep the rights to their work. They have greater say over the process, and they retain a lot more control. So those are some things I think that define what a hybrid press is. Ways in which I think Atmosphere is on the cutting edge of that term are just in terms of our dedication to transparency. We have our contract public on the website, like no other publishers, whether they be self-publishing or
Hmm.
traditional publishing, hybrid publishers. No one really is comfortable putting their contract out there,
I
but
wasn't
we
aware
just
that you did that. And so is it the
Mhm.
same for every author?
Yeah, every author, so it has, authors can make choices within the contract. We have three basic sort of packages that people can choose from, but they can just read online, the contract themselves. If it's not something that somebody is interested in, they're, free to work with somebody else. We don't try to twist anyone's arm, but we found that for a lot of authors, given the incredibly high quality of work that we do and the professionals who are part of our staff, that they are drawn to the types of rights and privileges that come with working with us, and it's worked out well for everyone involved.
So when you say it's worked out well, does that mean that there are authors making good money on the books that they're publishing?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, there are authors who have sold tens of thousands of copies or even six figures worth of copies. Then there are authors who don't sell a lot of copies. It's the same as in traditional publishing or in self-publishing. It just runs the
Hmm.
gamut. So some people are really motivated by sales. They're gonna, go out there. They've got a social media presence. They've got a newsletter mailing list that they're curating over years. They're hitting the road, going on book tours. Those people are selling copies. Other people are more content just to, have the book, work with professionals, have something that they're proud of, that they find to be meaningful, and they're more than content just to sell copies to their friends and family, or just even give away copies to charity. So we have authors of all different stripes.
And but you're selective. So
Yeah.
maybe you could talk about the selection process a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are selective. We're not a vanity press. We're not a self-publishing outfit where, we're just going to say, hey, whatever, we'll just slap the thing on Amazon. Like, we don't care. Every book that we publish says Atmosphere Press on it. Like, we take that seriously. We, back all the books on social media. We host readings with the authors who work with us. We often know when their birthdays are, and hope that their children are doing well and stuff like that. So these are relationships that are meaningful to us. So because of that, we have to not sign on everybody. Right. We have a limited amount of people who we take on every month. It's a maximum of 30 per month who we are willing to sign on. We reject a lot of books that just aren't ready, that don't have subject matter that's going to, suit our mission of contributing positively to the world. We have a number of other sort of standards about, the quality of the language itself, whether it's an author who's going to be well served by our process. So these are all things that we take into account when somebody submits a manuscript to us, and we, review the work, and then, any prospective author who sort of makes it through some initial vetting will have a call with one of our acquisitions editors, and that's when actual decisions are made as to whether this is going to be a good partnership. One thing
So
that I think
there's a few steps then in that process.
absolutely,
Hmm.
it's not just a you're in or you're out.
Uh-huh.
It's one thing I think is a really important part of it is just that conversation, because we value the author, and we are it publishing a book is not just you check a box and it happens, right? To do it right, it takes months and months and months and months. This is a
And it's a
process.
partnership. You
Yeah,
right? And so that also makes me wonder. I think because as I've been investigating some of these different presses and trying to figure out where I might have some synergy, which is really
Mhm.
what it's about, right? If there's no synergy, then maybe it's not something you want to get involved with. But do you have sort of a focus about that? I think like some of these hybrid publishers are finding some success, business success, which they need to pursue by also being like publishers of like genre fiction, or maybe they specialize in memoir or historical, like nonfiction, creative nonfiction. Is there something that you're sort of like geared towards, or that's what does get you inspired, or are you more general on both sides of that?
We do publish across all genres. We found that the genres that we're most drawn to are memoir, literary work. We do genre fiction, poetry, children's books. We do less of your sort of like hard business nonfiction, and I know there are a number of hybrid publishers out there where that's their bread and butter. That's what they
Right,
want to do.
right.
They want to find the person blogging on LinkedIn, and they
And
want to
those
like work with them.
professionals who know what they're talking about, right? But
Yeah.
so that's not your thing.
No, I mean, we have published a good number of books like that, but it's definitely not like, I mean, I have a PhD in literature. My background is
Uh huh.
poetry, right?
Okay.
So, many of our staff, these are people who, love writing short stories. They love writing novels, like there's definitely more of a literary tinge to what we do than there are to a lot of hybrid publishers that are more on the business side, because frankly the ones that focus on the business stuff, they can charge authors more, right? So
Let's
there's more
get
money.
okay. So let's get into the money a little, because I go back and forth. I guess I'm one of these writers. It's like, my personality gets involved, my ego sometimes, and I have to learn to step back. I'm trying to be more business like about things, and just, understand without getting emotionally involved all the time. But so when you start talking about like laying out cash, it adds another layer to the whole dimension of getting your manuscript published. And I think there is a danger with these hybrid publishers sometimes. Like, I did get a contract once that felt more like a sales pitch to me than a contract. And it kind of turned me off because I felt like, well, they're just trying to get my money and get me involved in this project, and they may or may not be professional about it, but just on a gut level, I didn't like the way that felt. And but so I think also there's like a gamut of how much a press hybrid press is going to ask you to spend just upfront to get your book published. And I think atmosphere is not at the top of that.
No,
So,
certainly not.
so maybe you could break that down a little bit, and because I think it's naturally and unavoidable that some people are going to be cut out of this because they cannot come up with that money.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the fact of the matter is that the way I think about it is that it just comes down to what are you getting? Right? Like there are places out there, like honestly, that'll charge $50,000 or $60,000, and just for full transparency, our prices run from 5,700 to 11,700. That's like our gamut right
And
there.
now, does that's to get published, or that would include the a marketing campaign
Oh
as
yeah,
well?
that higher level, it's like it's definitely all like there's marketing, there's reviews gotten, there's like blurbs for your book, there are paid ads behind your book, there's like Kirkus behind it, there's readings hosted. The thing is that there are places out there that are charging 50 or $60,000 who do less than we do.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one reason why our contract is public and our masthead is public. That's another thing I advise. Like whether you work with us, whether you work with somebody else, regardless of who you work with, look on the website, see if you can actually see the human beings you're going to be working with. See if your work is getting farmed out somewhere to, people on the other side of the world who you're never actually going to get to speak to, or who are just like, fly by night people that they found on Fiverr? Or are these people who are steady, they're part of the team, they've been part of the team for a long time? That's where that type of level of transparency to like who our team is, what our contract provides, those are real differentiators. And the amount of money that we charge, like our profit margin is very slim, right? We're not making a lot of money. We don't have a ton of investors. We don't have any investors. We have zero investors. This has been a company that has just worked purely, on a thin margin of profit since the very beginning in 2015 when I started it myself, and I was doing all the work. And it's still that way to this day. So if you see, that we're selling like our essential, like bottom line publishing package that involves editorial and design and proofreading and layout and some promotion and all these other sorts of things for $5,700, you can know that that is just about how much it actually costs to make that happen with professionals. Like you just can't get it done cheaper if you actually want to work with people who really know what they're doing. And all that, all these layers of transparency, I think, are important. And I think that they're lacking with a lot of hybrid publishers. Historically, for 100 years, they've been lacking in traditional publishing.
Mm. And so there's like the other maybe 20% of publishing that's, well, I guess which hybrid fits into as well, of just like small presses, indie presses, and hybrid is really part of that 20% as well. That's not the big five conglomerate sort of scene, right? So, from a writer's perspective, those are your choices. You can either decide to pursue an agent, that you have a product that an agent might be interested in, if to go that route, or you can kind of go this other 20% route of seeking a small press to just do it all. But I think in that case, you probably still have to really make a push to sell the book. With any small press, you have to do your part as an author to, if you want to have a lot of sales. But like you said, it depends on somebody's motivation for publishing a book in the
Mm-hmm.
first place.
Yeah, and the thing is that people believe that even a big five publisher that they're going to really promote the book. A lot of times they aren't.
They might bury
You
you,
know?
in fact, right?
Yeah,
Because they choose their favorite books to promote with their distributors. And if you're not one of those authors, then you may find yourself maybe at a disadvantage. It happens, right?
yeah. So the truth is that in today's world, if you're an author, it doesn't matter, like whether you have the biggest publisher or you self-publish on either side of those polls. Like you're still, if you want to sell copies, like you're gonna have to be a part of the promotion engine for that work.
Right. So, where does atmosphere fit in the landscape at this point? Do you see yourself having a continuing, growing catalog of books that are going to be still available and in print, 10 years from now?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, we're like I mentioned, we're not a place that's getting like Silicon Valley money or something like that. Like that's not something that interests us. So we're definitely about, responsible growth, trying to serve our authors well. We know that if we took on too many books, that our product would suffer, and our product is, our people and the quality of the service that we provide, like giving people like actual faces that they're working with, and like people who they know intimately through this process. So we're not, looking to become some sort of behemoth. uh, we are, of course, wanting to continue, growing our catalog, working with new authors, continuing to work with authors we've worked with in the past, and, keeping books in print. That's important. We don't want, our books to go out of print, or, we don't want our authors to have to stress out about that sort of stuff. So we're always doing a lot of work to,
And
make sure that everything
that's
stays
one of the
healthy.
advantages of working with a hybrid as opposed to self-publishing, right? Is at least the author does not have to, be talking to distributors.
Yeah,
Which
and
to
believe me.
me, yeah, you're shaking your head, and I'm like, hey, if I could get somebody else to do that, then that's
Yeah.
fine.
Uh,
Because, I learned my lesson trying to do the KDP self publishing thing, and it's really all about distribution in
yeah.
that sense. Because if you don't have it, then it's really hard to set up readings with bookstores and all those kind of basic things that you want to do if you're going to have a little book tour or something like that, right? But I would like to talk about your books at Atmosphere Press. Give you a little time to boast about what you are actually selling, what's out new this year, and also maybe talk about anything I didn't give you a chance to say about Atmosphere Press.
Yeah, yeah. So we've definitely, had a good year. Like the past year was a good year for us, and we're getting, more and more books, getting recognition, getting like Kirkus stars, being editors' picks with Book Life, selling a lot of copies. One initiative that we, launched this year just internally that I thought was really great was actually having an Atmosphere Book of the Year award. We'd never done that before. So just recently we, had internally like five of our books, nominated for uh, Book of the Year and as our Book of the Year finalists. And we chose a winner, which was Lost Graces by Helen Montague Foster, which is a really great sort of, it's about like psychology, it's about fear, it's about, you know, it's a thriller, and it's, just a really like fun, engaging, sort of tense novel that's really great. Then we have one called Tesla's Walk by Jimmy Senna, which is a poetry collection about Nikola Tesla's 8-month visit to Colorado Springs in
Oh,
1890.
I have an obsession with Nikola Tesla, so I'm going to have to check that one out. I used to tell a short story about him and his invention of radio and his whole thing about alternating and current electricity and his competition with Edison. It's a fascinating
Mm-hmm.
life Tesla had nothing to do with Elon Musk. But I'm sorry.
It
Go ahead.
certainly did not. It certainly did not. I always am like when I say it's like, oh, it's called Tesla's Walk. I'm like, not the cars.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a great book. It's really really
the
inventive.
real inventor of radio, actually.
Yeah,
Which the Supreme Court agreed to that back in
finally.
1962.
Yeah, and then another one, just one more that I want to point out is called "I Was a Hero Once" by Peter Mahoney, which is a really sort of fascinating story. He was a Vietnam veteran who then joined the peace movement. So it's a very interesting memoir, sort of talking about his experience of sort of going from being in the war to sort of working against the war, and then being a part of establishing the New York Vietnam Veterans Memorial, and meeting with Soviet counterparts from the Soviets' war in Afghanistan, all sorts of really fascinating stuff. So we're publishing a lot of really interesting stuff, and the thing is that a lot of it is just because, just like Brooke Warner would say, it's like there were lots of books that were really really great and high quality works that traditional publishing is overlooking because maybe they don't fit into a certain type of marketing niche that the publisher has in mind for that coming season. um,
After a while, to me, that feels a little like a dog chasing its tail. Like they think they know so well. They're always looking for the formula of success, and so they look at other things that succeeded, and they often don't see what's right under their nose, I think.
Yeah, I mean it's been surprising, because we've worked with a lot of authors who have traditionally published in the past. Like we've worked with a lot of, big five refugees, right?
Uh-huh.
And we've worked with a lot of authors who, had bad experiences, with traditional publishing, and that's why
Like
they
what?
wanted to work with us.
Like what are some of
Oh,
the reasons one would avoid, a traditional publishing contract?
Oh, just the amount of control, like you're always on their timeline, right? It might take like 2 years, it might take like 2 months to get an email response, from your editor. They might put a cover on your book that you don't like, they might bury you, as you said, or like neglect your book, let your book go out of print, like any number of reasons, just because historically the relationship between a publisher and author, the power dynamic was very asymmetrical. It was like the publisher had all the cards and the author was just lucky to be there, and
Right.
that's sort of, what I wanted to, push against from the very start is like, hey, the author, poured their heart and soul into this work. So let's give it some respect.
Well, I think that's a great place to kind of wrap up the conversation, and I really appreciate that. I do have a couple more questions for you, though, that I like to ask all of our guests. And one is, well, have any of your authors been banned? And, how is your whole perception and thoughts about the whole book banning? I don't know what to call it anymore, just, the phenomenon here in this country.
Yeah, I'm not positive if any of our books have been banned, but I can think of a lot of our books that if they would be banned if if they were, somebody tried to put them in the school. We have published a lot of, LGBTQ plus authors. We've published authors of a wide variety of religious backgrounds and, gender identities, so those types of books obviously, would be, in
Maybe vulnerable.
a bad state of things, and that's something obviously that we're going to be, keeping an eye on, going forward in the future, is just trying to, be a safe place for people,
And where
and
are you based?
Austin, Texas.
Uh huh.
Yeah, and our staff is all over the
So
place.
Texas, that's one of those states. They like to ban books in Texas, don't they?
They do indeed, they do indeed. But I'm in Austin, so we're, a little bit of an oasis in
Uh-huh.
the greater state for sure.
I see. I'll have to keep that in mind. I forgot to ask you as well if listeners want to get in touch with you, if they want to buy Atmosphere Press books or just know more about everything. How would you like people to visit you?
Yeah, I think, just going to atmospherepress.com is the place to go. And, it's honestly, it's like we've got a lot of resources on there, cuz one thing that's really important to us is that, like you mentioned earlier, not everybody can afford hybrid publishing. Like I understand that, like I grew up without resources, like I know how that can be. So we really find it valuable to try to provide resources free of charge. So we do a free interview series. We have a lot of free tools on our website. We've got a really, really extensive database of articles about writing and publishing and book promotion. So that's definitely something to check out. And then we also have some really cool tools on there, like a publishing potential quiz where you can answer some questions and it'll give you bespoke feedback, sort of sort of giving you guidance based on your answers on what sort of publishing route might be ideal for you personally.
Interesting. That sounds like a valuable tool for writers as they're trying to walk their way through the maze.
Yeah, definitely. And we're always going to be honest with somebody. It's like
Uh-huh.
if it seems like, oh, like working with Atmosphere might not be the best fit for you, like that's totally fine. We want you to, achieve your writer goals, however, whatever shape that might take. And we also on our website have a free book giveaway. So that's that's an easy one there. And we have a lot of our authors will sign up to be a part of the free book giveaway, so you can get some good books just by signing up for that.
I see. Well, you heard it here at Listen and Be Heard. And if I could ask you, I'm going to put you on the spot now and ask you to improvise and just give me a phrase or two with the phrase "Listen and Be Heard."
Yeah, so I'm thinking about that, and I think when it comes to being an author and considering publishing, I want you to listen to your heart, and that will help your book be heard.
Well, thank you so much for joining me here in the audio garden. Nick Courtright, publisher of Atmosphere Press. And if you enjoyed listening to this conversation, please subscribe to the Listen and Be Heard YouTube channel or visit us at listenandbeheard.net. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you for having me.